Shalom, dear friends, and welcome again to a new episode of Torah with an Accent. Particularly, I think it's a historical episode because, as if you're following, you know that each one of us actually opens every week this meeting, and by the fact that I'm opening, we are starting the second cycle of these meetings, and it has been very rewarding and exciting to do this. We are today discussing Parashat Shelach Lecha, the parasha that tells a famous story, the story of the invitation, the order. I would love to hear what you have to say about it. God gives to Moshe to send spies, to send scouts into the land to see how the land looks, what kind of land it is, how are the cities, what kind of fruits grow up there, and to report back to the people. That's what the scouts, the spies do. They spend 40 days touring the land, and when they come back, they tell what they see. And the problem is that what they see is not very encouraging in terms of, in their perception, the capacity to actually conquer the land. And because they tell this story, and because they say we cannot do this, and because the people despair and say, why are we here? Why we came to the desert? We're all about to die. Let's go back to Egypt. God punished them and decides that that generation won't go into the land. Shlach Lecha sounds to me a lot like Lech Lecha, the order or the invitation that God gave to Abraham when he first came to him and said to go to the land of Canaan, to the land of Israel. And Abraham did what God asked. The spies did what God asked, but the result was very different. In one case, Abraham was rewarded, and here the spies and the people they represented were punished. And to me, the real big question is, what do we do with this God that invites you to do something, but only if you come up with a particular answer? Are we talking, is a God that values more obedience, that partnership? What do we do with that? How do we read this particular story? Is the story that we're reading in our Parsha the complete story? Because when you go to the book of Dvarim, and Moshe remembers this story, he actually tells a little different story. It's not God, the one who initiates that and asks the scouts to go to visit the land, but the people who say to Moshe, we want to know where we're going. And as you know, according to some of the commentators, the way it went was this: the people asked Moshe, Moshe asked God, and God gave the permission to do so. So I invite you to comment on this. How do you read this story? What do you do with this God punishing them because the answer they came back with after seeing, and they're just reporting what they saw, is not what God was expecting. And that's for Rabbi Kulok, Rabbi Kormis, and Rabbi Kogan. For Rabbi Wervin, I first want you to know, we want to know, who came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for letting me. So let me introduce you to Rabbi Kogan. This is the guy on the bottom right. This is the same Rabbi Kogan he was here last week, but just in case, you know.
Is that his brother?
No.
Younger brother. I like his new look.
Okay.
So, you know, Rabbi Karpuch, there's a delay with Amazon deliveries. So if you want to see, you have to keep coming and listen to our classes. I promise one day when Amazon delivers, we'll see what came first, whether the chicken or the egg. So
thank you.
Rabbi Kogan, please enlighten us. You have to unmute yourself.
So hi everybody. Thank you so much for recognizing my new look, and thank you, Rabbi Werman, for letting me go first. Without telling me. So that's wonderful. So here is, I think it's a wonderful question, Rabbi Karpuch. I think that, you can have many answers, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will try to see what went wrong. But I think that you ask a very important question, and is God happy with any outcome when he gives us a choice? And I think the answer is no. I think that we have a free choice, a free will, but God has a plan, and the plan is to be carried at the end of the day. So the plan is you're going to Egypt, and you're going to go to the land of Canaan, a land that flows honey and milk. That's the plan. So you cannot go back to Egypt. When they say, let's give us a new leader and go back to Egypt, God is not going to say, you know what? Who votes to go back to Egypt? The majority goes back. It doesn't work like this. I mean, this could be in a democracy, but the Torah is not a democracy. God is not a democratic leader. And I think he wants us to arrive to the same conclusions that he has for us. In other words, he wants us that our choice will be somehow the same choice that he has in mind. And when we don't, I am afraid, there are consequences. Now, why he doesn't say that from the beginning, I think that this is a good question. I think that there are some hints that point to the fact that God is directing them to a right conclusion. Let's say with Abraham, God says, Lech Lecha, go to this particular land. And or if you go, I will give you all these blessings and everything is going to be good for you. What if he says, no, I'm not going to go. I like to stay where I am. So guess what? Everything that he promised is not going to happen. So I think that the point is that there are consequences to whatever is similar to a parents with children. I say, do you want to go to camp? You are going to go to camp. Hopefully you will say, yes, I love to. But eventually you are going to go. Something like that. I'm just leaving this there, for other people to reply. I think the main thing is that I think that we love, because we live in democratic societies, we love to believe that the Torah is democratic, and it is not. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. So I agree with you that the Torah is not democratic at all, right? And you have the leaders who are leading the people, and they are not elected. They are appointed by God, right? But that's for another discussion. I want to point out two things. The first one, addressing your question, Rabbi Karpuch, I think this is a marvelous, marvelous narrative. And this is so well written in the Torah that when you read this story, you say, wow, I can really picture, the people scouting the land, coming back, giving the report. At the same time, it's so human. I think it's so human that you can really relate to what it says there. And my first point here, the way that I read this story, the first one is there's a very human approach here. And if you take a look to how they bring back the report to Moses, you'll see that after scouting the land, and I have the text right here, after scouting the land for 40 days, they say they went straight to Moses, and then they made their report, and they said, this is what they told him, verse 27, we came to the land you sent to us. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. It's a wonderful land, but, right, we won't be able to conquer it. We won't be able to inherit the land. That's so human, right? Because when you want to say something, first you start with the positive, and then you say, but, right? So how many but, we know of our own telling stories or our own trying to negotiate something, right? So they say, this is wonderful. We all love this. But Ephes, right? So the Torah says, verse 28, Ephes, sorry, but we are not going to. So
I think that, that's the first point. And there's a beautiful commentary here on the Etz Chaim Chumash. It's attributed to Menachem Mendel Mikotsk. And let me just read it very briefly. It says, what the scouts reported was factually correct, meaning they give the facts. They gave the correct facts, but it was not the truth, right? So you can give a correct report, a fair report, but that's not necessarily the truth. Truth is more than a summary of empirical facts. It must include the response of the soul to those facts, and this is where the scouts failed in their duty, right? So going back to your question, I think it's not only about giving the right facts and carrying out what God demanded from him, but it's also the way you present it, the way you involve yourself with the facts, and how your soul is responding to the circumstance itself, okay? Then I'm going to say the other, my other idea later, so I can let my colleagues.
So let me add to that very same verse that Rabbi Kormis just quoted. There is a wonderful Rashi that is actually quoted. You know, Rashi is quoting the Talmud, but he says on the verse 27, when they are saying that it's Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, it's a wonderful land. Rashi says, "Kol dvar sheker she'ein omrim bo ktsat emet bitchilato, ein mitkayem besofo," which is Hebrew for it's like any statement that is a dvar sheker, that is a lie, but doesn't have a bizarre truth, a little bit of a true statement in it, it's very hard to sustain itself. And I think that, you know, it's not exactly what Rabbi Karpuch was opening with, but I, you know, since you quoted the verse, I was thinking about how this is so relevant for today, in which truth and lie and how we present facts can transform realities. And people reading, I don't know, the New York Times or watching Fox TV can be talking about the same country from completely different perspectives. Doesn't matter whether you are on the right or on the left. It doesn't matter. It's the same facts that when you put together, you have two different narratives. And this is what we are seeing here. But what I wanted to say regarding the connection between Shlach Lecha, our weekly parsha, and Lech Lecha, the best parsha in the Torah, the parsha of my bar mitzvah.
We have no doubt.
You know, the best parsha in all of the Torah. I think that there is a line connecting both of them in what regards to faith. And what does it mean to be faithful? And I think that there is an ongoing theme in the Torah, in which actually in this parsha shows it comes like in big letters, because even God is not getting this yet. But it's this idea that faith somehow is attached to what is happening outside. So we see in this parsha, God angry and kind of frustrated, saying to Moses, how long these guys are not gonna get, or don't, you know, why I show them with so many signs and so many miracles, and they are still not believing. They are still not having any faith, any trust, because let us remember that the word emunah in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew at least, is connected to imun in the idea of trust. These guys are not trusting. And something that I always quoted and I always have found interesting is this idea from Yeshayahu Leibovich, who used to say that the Torah's big message is that faith is not related to what you see outside. It's a decision that you make within. And what the problem with the whole story, with this wonderful story about the spies, is that it doesn't matter what they were going to see in the land of Israel. They made the decision to not have any faith in what they could accomplish. So even if they saw big fruits and, you know, the image that the Israel's Ministry of Tourism has today with the guys carrying big grapes, none of that would make any difference because faith is something that depends on your subjective internal decision and not in what you see outside. And it's, I think, part of the journey that Abraham is learning as well. And that may be the connection between the two Lech Lechas. The Lech Lecha at the beginning of Abraham's journey, when faith is more of a transaction of, I will, do this and I will give you land and offspring. And the Lech Lecha of Parashat Vayera, in which God is saying, I want what actually I promised you to begin with. The second Lech Lecha in Abraham's life is the Lech Lecha requesting the offspring that was the promise of the first one. And we could have an interesting conversation maybe today, maybe when we come to October to discuss Lech Lecha, about whether Abraham, in being willing to sacrifice his own son, is defining what a true believer is, or he is failing on that last test. But that's maybe for another day.
So I think, Rabbi Kuliok, there's a bit of truth in what you just said. There's a bit of truth. So I think but anyway, so Ephes. So I wanted to say that first of all, it's nice to see your smiles once again, and kind of settle down and relax a little bit on this serious matter. I want to connect the two words that are not necessary in both of these parashot that Rabbi Karpuk wanted to tie together. It's Lecha. Hashem could have said to Abraham, Lech. There's no need for Lecha. And then God says to Moses, Shlach Lecha. And there's a lot of discussion of why is it necessary to include that Lecha into that commandment. And I think it goes back to what Rabbi Kogan was presenting, that I believe also, I think as Rabbi Kogan does, that there's a plan. And the plan cannot be accomplished without our participation. Yes, there's a plan, it's going to happen, but God wants us to be part of that plan. And that's why the Lecha is as important as the commandment. Because if there was only the commandment and just we doing it as robots without any thought, without any participation, without any involvement and commitment, the plan is going to happen anyway, but it's going to be a different type of plan. It's going to be a different type of consequence. It's not going to taste the same. It's like when you prepare a meal and when you go and then you eat and you enjoy that meal because you put yourself into that meal. You cooked, and sometimes it comes out well. The same thing, my wife and my son are enjoying my haircut because they did it, and they say, it looks so great. And I say, oh,
now I understand why.
Exactly. So, there's a hole here, there's a hole here. It looks good. We put the effort.
Good to you.
Yeah, well, that's what they say. I'm not sure it's 100% correct, but when you involve yourself in the master plan, my master plan was to get a haircut, but they did it. Now they are part of it, and the haircut was going to happen regardless. I could have done it against the mirror, and it's going to look also horrible like this one. But there's the Lecha that is not necessary, and when you become part of the plan has a different taste, and that's why God finished creation and made us partners in that creation. Leovdau leshomra. So we are part of that creation. So I have something else that I also kept for the end. So I will share it later.
So let me go back. Thank you, each one of you, for your reflections. There are two things that I want to comment on the things that you said. The first one, I get this is not a democracy. But if it is not a democracy, you don't ask the people what they think about it. That would be my first, just tell them, why do you need to go and see the land? I'm telling you it's good, and I'm telling you that I'm giving it to you, and I'm telling you that. So, and I understand that Rabbi Warren just gave us, in a way, one answer for that. I want you to be with me in this plan. I see with Rabbi Kulok in terms of Parashat Lech Lecha, I think that the faith is not on the Akedah. The faith is in the moment that also Abraham has questions about God's plan and says, hey, I follow you. I did everything you said, and here I come, and I don't have children, so who will be? And he went out, right? Aved na Shamaima, right? Look at the stars and see if you can count them. Ko yeh zarecha, as many as the stars will be your descendants. And it says specifically, and Abraham believes in God and believes in the promise, and God basically rewarded him for that. Now, the case in which we have it right now is different, but this is the same God who just said in the book of Leviticus, "Lifnei iver lo titen michshol," right? You shall not place a stumbling block in front of a blind person. If the plan is to take the people there, why put them in a situation in which they will be afraid actually to go all the way there?
It's a question, and I don't have an answer for that. We need to think about.
It's a great question.
But let me just say that Rabbi Kormis wants to say something.
No, I was thinking about your question. I think it's a great question. Lifnei iver lo titen michshol, and what you're saying is, was this a situation where God was putting them to a test that they could not fulfill or overcome, right? Maybe. If we understand this parsha as a test, right? Because we know that Lech Lecha, and back then in the book of Bereshit, and we know that this tradition which says that there were 10 tests that Abraham went through them. The first one was with the word Lech Lecha, and the 10th one was with the word Lech Lecha again, with the sacrifice or the binding of Isaac. So do we want to see this or analyze this as a test as well? I don't know. If it is a test, they clearly failed. And I have a possible answer that I would like to venture here. And it has to do with one of my favorite passages in the Torah. We all have our favorite passages in the Torah. This is one of my favorite passages in the Torah, and it is really at the almost at the end of the first report of the Meraglim of the scouts. And it is the verse which says this, like the conclusion of the report. It's verse 33. They say, "We saw the Nephilim there. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them." So there is no self-esteem there. There is no self-confidence that they will be able to conquer the land. And going back to what Rabbi Kulok was saying, faith is not something that is out there. Faith is something that you have inside, within yourself. And clearly, they did not have the faith that they needed in order to conquer the land. So to me, that's why they failed. They failed not because of the report. They failed because, and they failed the test, because they did not have the self-esteem, the self-confidence that they needed in order to inherit the land. And even more, the Midrash says that, how do you know? How do you know how they looked you? How do you know how you appeared in their eyes? And the Midrash says, maybe you were in their eyes like malachim, like angels, right? So I think that they failed the test, and they failed the test not because of the report. They failed the test because of the lack of their self-esteem and confidence.
So I learned from you, Rabbi Kormis, something very interesting, and that I want to add to your interpretation and to your comment. That in the book of Lamentations of Eicha, you know, that we all know that the day when they brought back the report, it was Tisha B'Av. Mm-hmm. And Eicha is written in an acronym, okay? And the acronym, every verse, or more than, in some chapters, more than one verse, they go Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. But there are some chapters that it doesn't follow exactly the order of the Aleph Bet, but there's a slight difference. and it's the pay. They put the pay before the ein. Nun samach ein pay is the right order, but in the text you will see that the verses that come with the letter pay comes before the letter ein, and that's what the Meraglim did. They used their pay, their mouth, before their ein, their eyes. So it's a lack of faith in some ways, but also what they are saying is, I know how we look in their eyes. We know how we look in their eyes. How is that possible? Did they interact with them? Did they tell you you are small like we are giants and you're grasshoppers? Yes, kahagavim. How do they know that? So they put first their pe and then their ein. They did not let what they saw to be expressed. They already had a message, and probably that takes us back with the goal or the plan that God has. Maybe the plan was that they will put their pay before their ein, their mouth before their eye, so the people of Israel will be in the wilderness for 40 years.
Yeah, but I want to take on this, and I was having a conversation right before this this dialogue with all of you. This idea that I love the midrash from reflecting on Eicha, but I have read that most of the time we already know what we want or what we think that we believe, and everything else is kind of an ad hoc looking for ways to rationalize where we are. So what we are seeing here is that they were already not willing or looking to go back to Egypt, or with doubts or with fears, all of those things. And so none of what they saw in Israel was used to the benefit of let's go. Okay, we see today.
But they were princes of Israel. They were people of, if you want, they were people of Torah, and that's
correct. But that teaches you that people of high lineage or pedigree or with places of authority can also, they are entitled, and they are probably not able to move away from where they are unless they can think about those things. You see today, we live in a country that is politicizing whether you need to use a mask or not. So it's based on where you are, you will look for reasons to justify this action or this other action. And maybe none of those will make any sense. Here, we have a group that is willing to not go into the land, and what they see won't change them. We have another group that is willing to go into the land, and whatever they see won't change that either, because again, the 12 are seeing the same thing, and how can you see two different things out of the same scene? Well, this is exactly what we were talking before. But to the original idea or question by Rabbi Karpuch, I think that it's not, the text doesn't seem to show us that God is putting them to test, because God shows, the text is presenting God as someone who's saying, I am deeply frustrated. It's like if God was putting them to a test, knowing that probably they will fail or not or whatever, we wouldn't see that God that is willing to wipe them from and begin all over from Moses. So I think that the learning experience is a learning experience that is coming from the two sides, in which maybe the silver lining of the story is the understanding that relationships can only get to occur and strengthen if we understand two things. First, that our partner won't always deliver, and second, that we won't always deliver. That there is some recognition of, because if we go that we need to always hit the right note, that is going to fail at some point. And I think that part of the development of this relationship between the people and God is based not on the fact that we fulfill or we do exactly as we are asked to do every time, but the fact that God will love us and take us and embrace us no matter what. one of the key prayers of the High Holidays, the Avinu Malkeinu, Asei Manu, Tzedakah V'Chesed. So we are asking God to take us in, not because we did everything right, but because we know that we are prone to fail, and we are hoping that God will embrace us out as an act of tzedakah and out as an act of chesed, which, you know, I like Maimonides' definition of chesed as that type of love that is given without you having to do anything to earn it. And that is the type of relationship that we are asking to be with God and maybe with other human beings. It's a relationship that is built upon trust, about mutual recognition, about the embracing of the frustration that, you know, it's not going to be all the time as we want. But then out of this abundant love, that we didn't do everything to deserve. Okay, so it's that's my take, and that's how I understand on chapter 14 when God is saying, what's going on? I showed them everything and they still don't get it. Well, guess what? Spoiler alert, we may not get it, and the good news is that still God loves us, and so we could love God in return because of that chesed that has been bestowed upon us. Kirolam Chasdo, we sing, you know, the psalm says, and maybe that's where the Torah is, or our tradition is trying to move us to the idea of a relationship that is not expecting perfection. It's expecting sincerity and loyalty and the willingness to be there for each other the best we can.
There's a missile of truth in your
It's another. It's I see that's the line that you love the most.
You keep adding. You keep adding.
Let me, Rabbi Wervin, just share some thoughts very quickly. The first one is to Rabbi Karpuch. I don't think that God asked them for their opinion. God did not ask them, just give me your opinion. God really told them, bring me some facts. The questions were very clear, and God doesn't need their permission to go, you know, this is just give me these facts, and they gave them an opinion that was not requested. The reason I think, Rabbi Karpuch, is that they have an agenda. And the problem is not lack of faith. Abraham had lack of faith, and God reassured him. And these spies have also lack of faith, and Caleb and Yeshua, they try to reassure them. So I don't think the problem is to have doubts. The problem is not to say, I cannot make it, I cannot do it, but what is the next step? And I think when the problem is lack of faith, when the problem is I'm not convinced, then I can have a conversation. When the problem is an agenda, and I like to suggest that the agenda here, and they say that, is let's put as a leader and go back to Egypt. The agenda is we don't want this leader that we have. We don't want Moshe, we don't want God, we don't want Aaron, we don't like this plan. We have an agenda. And maybe the agenda I like to suggest was there from the beginning. The agenda is let's go back to Egypt. And let's go back to Egypt with a new leader. Because in Egypt we were not great, but at least we didn't have this leader, and maybe we were leaders there. Then you can have maybe a conversation as well there. The problem is when they distort the reality and they call Egypt the land flowing with milk and honey, when they call the place where they kill their children and they enslave them and they torture them, the land flowing with milk and honey, for the sake of their agenda, then I think that the conversation is over, because you won't be able to change them. It's not Abraham that has a doubt that God can reassure him. These are people who, if they can call Egypt land flowing with milk and honey, I think that God is saying, I cannot continue with this conversation. That's when the moment when God says, you know, this is over. And I think that for me, again, coming back to America these days, I think that it's very important that we engage in conversations. But we also need to recognize that maybe some points in the conversation, and cannot be every single point, but maybe a few points in which we can say we are in such different places that the conversation is not going to go well. And I think in this case, you know, people have an agenda. Because they have an agenda, you cannot really have a conversation about the merit of your idea, because you already know what the answer is. And the answer is that I want to go back and I want a different leader and I am not part of this project. I want to say one more thing about Rabbi Kuliok. It has nothing to do with this, but it has to do with something that Rabbi Kuliok said. And for me, that was a Dayenu moment. And I happen to agree that faith is a decision. Faith is a decision. Faith is not related to miracles. It's not related to someone opening the sea for you. And you're right that Yeshayahu Leibovich had this. Faith is something that you decide.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to have faith, if you want to believe, you believe. And if you don't want to believe, they can split the sea for you, as they did for all the spies there. They saw all these miracles and it didn't help. They have an agenda. They didn't want to believe, and they didn't believe. They went back and they stayed there in the wilderness.
With that spirit, I want to share something that I read about. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. Beautiful.
Please do share.
Yes. So it's from Kedushat Levi Yitzhak Miverdishev. He wrote a beautiful book. And I'm going to quote it because I found it very, very interesting. And I think it you know, completes, if I may use that term, what you just said, Rabbi Cohen. And it says, Bezeu shlach. This is the meaning of shlach, you know, to send. Leshon amshacha. It's the language of continuity. Migzeirat batishlach et amata. When you know, the same term used when the first daughter sends, we don't know if it's her servant or her hand, that according to the Midrash became longer because the Amma is also, you know, the cubit. Anyway, so Kema'amar Hachameinu Zal, as our sages said, Dehainu sheyamshichu me'em enoshutam, that they will continue their humanity. Sheyavou lemadregat Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, that they will go back and be like Moses. Okay. Bezeu shlach lecha anashim. This is the meaning of shlach lecha anashim. Sheyamshichu et enoshutam. The ainu, so that they continue their enoshut, their person, their humanity. Thank you. And the hainu it pashtut agashmiut al sheyabou lecha. The hainu madrigat shelcha, that they become something that is yours. Hainu sheyabou leretz Knaan, that they will come to the land of Canaan. Laturota lo laturota begashmiyotea chas v'shalom, not to enjoy the physically of it, the gashmiut. Rak miya kesheyavou shama ya'amdu ala Torah ve'ala avodah. When they will go there, they will enjoy the service of God and the Torah. And here is it. And here is what blew my mind. Vezeu bayaturu migzeirat Torah. When they are going to go out there, is to bring back the Torah. Okay? The word bayaturu, we think that they are going to scout the land. That's the word that gives the name to tourism, in the same root. בעיקר כשישראל עוסקים בתורה ובמצוות, יש להם חלק בארץ ישראל, מדבר ירושת אבותיה. So that faith, the bayatur, when they are going out to Torah, brings them back and gives them the opportunity to inherit the land that their forefathers received, besides the zchut of the avot, not because they acquired that. So that Moses is sending them to be like, not exactly like Moses, but to embrace the same faith, the same Torah that Moses had and wanted to share with them. So I found it very nice, especially the part of the Bayoturu and the connection with the Torah.
If I may try to put together some of the things that you have been saying and that inspire me. I will start by saying that I don't think that maybe the image we have to think about is about democracy, as Rabbi Cohen suggested at the beginning. One of my favorite scenes in the entire Torah is in the book of Shmot, chapter 19, before the Ten Commandments. God comes to Moshe and says, here I'm coming and this is the plan, right? And there's this verse that you know that is out of order, and Rashi says, what happened there that is not in the text is that they came to God and said, we don't want that. We don't want you to talk to Moshe. We want you to talk to all of us, right? And then there's a change. You have 3 days to how to prepare and in order to be ready. And what happened the moment that God comes? The people are afraid. And they cannot actually stand in front of God and says to Moshe, you know what? Let's go back to plan A. You talk to God, we'll believe you. I always thought about that image of a God who is actually, we love to think of that we have a relationship with God that is like one-on-one, like the one that Moshe has according to the Torah, that we have a vertical relationship. And it's not like that. It's a relationship that actually is from like a father to a kid, a father who always loves you and that he will always love because there's that relationship that there's nothing you have to do there, right? And this God who in the book of Shmot says to Moshe, they want to do that, let's do it that way. I know they won't be able to stand, but I need to prove them that. In a way, I think that in this parsha are sending the spies not to trick them, not to make them fail, but to prove them, maybe you are not the generation that needs to go to the land. And in a way, in that sense, it's a very sad kind of message and ends in a really bad way. However, after the crisis of chapter 13 and 14, chapter 15 starts with, וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, כי תבואו אל ארץ מושבותיכם אשר אני נותן לכם. God says to Moshe, speak to the children of Israel, when you will come to the land of your homes that I'm giving to you. Wait a second, you just said that we're not going. What do you mean? And I think that this is the message here. You may not go in yourself physically, but you're still going through your kids. And actually, through them, even if not physically, you will achieve the goal we all set together when we start.
It's we need to. I don't know if Rabbi Kormis has something to close or not. You said that you had something to say later, but I want to say to Rabbi Kogan one thing. And I think that we all have an agenda. And so I don't have so much of a problem with 10 people having an agenda of willing to go back to Egypt. You know what? We may not agree. But they had an agenda, and Caleb and Yeshua had a different agenda. The problem is not with the agenda, because we all have an agenda. The question or the problem, and that is probably a reflection of what I see happening in our days, is the fact that we are not willing to listen to someone who has a different agenda. And there is no dialogue. And so there is no way of trying to reach some sort of agreement, even in our disagreement. In that regard, this text seems to be speaking precisely about the dangers of not being able to talk things through. And it might be that, taking what Rabbi Karpuch just said, that there is an ongoing hope in our text that we will reach a point in which we can listen to one another. Again, if we know, we all know the spoiler alert. It's not that the next generation coming after this one, who was not meant to go into the promised land, will be much better. And the generation after will also have some issues. And the generation after, all the way until our generation, because, it's like, otherwise we would be with the Messiah already. Has not happened. So I personally don't have much of a problem with people having an agenda. I have a problem with people unable to speak to one another, or only being interested in listening to the echo chambers of their own thoughts. And that's what's happening now. And that may bring us to very similar outcomes as the one that shows up in our parsha. And it won't be to any of our own interests if we need to wait for another 40 years until this nation achieves some wonderful outcomes in providing a better type of society, not the one that replicates Egypt as we left it, but that aspires to something else in our ongoing journey into the promised land.
I fully agree with you, Rabbi Kulok. And what I wanted to say is that the five of us, we are all congregational rabbis, so we know very well the meaning of pushing agendas, right? And we know congregants, and we know staff, and we know people who...
Not here in Nashville. Here, everyone is
sure.
great.
No, I'm sure. It's
sorry.
not in Nashville, not Atlanta. No,
my congregants are the best congregants ever.
Sure. So we all know very well what's the meaning of pushing an agenda. And I think that...
Can you explain that?
Yeah, we'll talk offline about that. But I'm sure, and people can relate to this, right? And I'm sure that our viewers can certainly relate to this, because it's not only the synagogue, right? It's in your place of work, it's in your family, it's with your friends, it's in your, group of peers, when people want to push their own agenda. And it's fine. And I agree with you, Rabbi Kulok, that each one of us, we all have our agendas, right? But when we are not willing to compromise it, when we are not willing to even listen to what other people have to say, that's a problem. And I think that was one of the problems of the Meraglims, of the scouts, and it's that they were not willing to open their perception to other points of view, like Joshua and Caleb, right? And and other possibilities that would be beyond their agenda. And once I heard this idea of this, play with they were Roshei Ben. How's the verse? The first the Kohen Aliyah. Roshei Ben Israel. It says that they were the Rashim. They were the head of the Jewish people. But then they are called Meraglim, from regel, from foot, right? So were they Rosh or were they regel, right? Were they head or were they foot? And sometimes I can connect to that. When you push your agenda, you are more of the regel, right? You want to push it and you want to move it and you want to come along with your own way. But sometimes you have to be the Rosh, right? Sometimes you have to use your ideas, your thoughts, your understanding in order to think what is better for you and what's better for the people who are around you. So I think that's part of the tension with this group of 10 people. Sometimes they were Rosh and sometimes they were Meraglim, using their foot. And that's the tension that I also see as part of this.
Wow. Nice.
Thank you all. I promise you that this is not over. Next week with Parashat Korach, we will engage back into this idea of agendas and leadership and who is in charge and who should be in charge. Thank you all. It has always been a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, like
well,
take care, you all.